Hello and welcome to the Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, Trent Clark. I am the CEO of Leadershipity and Aim for NIL. We are all athletic influencer marketing, and also a lot of people know me because I spent over 12 years in professional baseball, coaching in 3 World Series, speak all over the world. I'm also an author of Leading Winning Teams with Wiley Business. Super excited about that book coming out. But today's show is about my man, Phil Pelucha. Phil, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm blessed, brother. Very nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh man, I'm so excited to talk about this. Phil is a former footballer, and he's still playing. You're still in the game, man. Like you're
I'm
you're
still in
you're
the game.
kind of you're still in the game. Like it's very cool. And when I say footballers, Americans, I'm not talking about the NFL. I am talking about the beautiful game, the world's game that everybody stops for everything and plays, as we know, soccer. All right. So a Liverpool native, Phil. How many clubs did you play for, Phil, along the way?
So 4 professionally. Liverpool,
Okay.
unfortunately, was never one of them, although Liverpool is my club. 400 years of ancestry in Liverpool. One of the founders was actually an ancestor of mine, and I still can't get to play for the club. So maybe that tells you something about my performance on the field.
Well, I mean, listen, I love when you say 400 years of blood in Liverpool. I mean, we're in America, right? We are an immigration of folks, right? We have Native
Mm.
Americans, of course, which is great, like an indigenous population, which is very cool and part of our heritage.
Yep.
Unfortunately, that relation didn't start well, right? But
Sure.
it's definitely been a big part of our culture uh, as we've come over the years and recultured our environment, and that changes all the time in America because of the immigration. But
Yeah.
man, when I think about America, we're not 300 years old yet, right? So like, just to put
Yeah.
it in perspective, right, when you go, hey, I got 400 years of blood in Liverpool, it's a big deal.
Yeah, it's huge. And it's actually really interesting. So, I've been doing a lot of the ancestry genealogy stuff over the past couple of years, and I actually have learned more about American history than I anticipated because my mum's side of the family is Liverpool and Ireland, and my dad's side of the family is Scotland and Plymouth, so right at the bottom. And we actually have ancestors who went over with some of the first colonizers in the States. I think there's 2 of our ancestors were on the Mayflower, both connected to each other by
Yeah.
blood. And so a lot of that has been, it's not really stuff that we're taught. I mean, I guess depending on where you're educated, you're taught about your history, right, rather than global history. So there was a
Yeah.
lot that we didn't know about America. Britain is very good at teaching you about the things that we won rather than the ones that we lost. So we tend to know, like, oh, we used to own America. It's like, oh, great, do we still own America? No, we don't talk about that. And it's like, oh, okay.
Well,
So
it's such a good point, right, Phil, that you talk about this, because in America, people think like African slavery is the only slavery that ever happened in the world, and I'm like,
yeah,
hey, you remember this Bible thing with
yeah,
the Jews in Egypt? Like it started early. Like this is not.
oh yeah,
There's been many of cultures that have adopted those behaviors of
definitely.
people or labor, and man, that was bought and sold for really since the beginning of our time, and we've almost eradicated it
Yeah.
worldwide, and yet it still rears its head, and
Yeah, I think it's such an emotive subject for people, isn't it? I mean, it's and I can understand, not knowing where you're from. I'm blessed to know that there's 400 years of Liverpool in my blood, whereas I know that there are some African American friends of mine, for example, that aren't even really sure where their heritage in Africa stems from because the records aren't there.
yeah.
So that, if you and there's a great saying, isn't there, that if you don't know where you came from, then how do you know where you're going? And I guess
Mm,
there's definitely an element of that, but one of the things I do love about the US is that it is a real melting pot of cultures and customs, and I think that it's America has created an environment that it's home to anybody who wants to come in, work hard, do well for the country, do well for themselves, will be welcomed here. And I for one, I'm all about that. Like, I'm best person for the job. Do the best you can. Go as far up that ladder as you possibly can. The only thing that should be limiting you is your own abilities and how far you're prepared to push yourself. So, yeah. So I think
love
America
it.
does that pretty well, actually.
Well, thanks, man. I mean, we are certainly, I think, known for it worldwide. I think maintaining that level
Mm,
is challenged today for our
mm,
environment. It's a definitely with a lot of illegal immigration challenges and a lot of things that are
yep,
going on in the country.
yep.
It's becoming a new challenge of the day. Speaking of though geography of where we're at, I
Mm,
today am up at Varnum. This is a law firm here at the top of Grand Rapids here. I'm sitting up at the top of the skyline here,
nice.
getting ready for a board meeting and excited about that. And you are in a British colony of your own, my man. Yeah. So the Billionaire in Boxers has got a new HQ, and you are in St. Lucia. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So I moved to the Caribbean about a year ago. Absolutely love it out here. Beautiful part of the world. Yep, was former British colony. In fact, learning about the history of the island has been fascinating because it seems to have been passed back and forth between the French and the British, fighting each other for time and memoriam. But look, it's a beautiful island, incredible people, and the weather's certainly better than the UK. I can tell you that much.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot better place to be a billionaire in boxers than maybe the UK, right? Like,
Oh,
you
definitely.
could be a cold billionaire in boxers in the UK, and down there, you're always
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, you're fine walking around in your boxer shorts here all year round, whereas in the UK, that can lead to frostbite in some areas that you really want to avoid.
Now, real quick, married, two kids, and you've got an interesting story about how your whole started. I mean, like, a pro football player who met
Mhm.
his wife on Twitter. Like,
Yeah.
please explain. Do tell, Ricky Bell.
So, one of my friends at the time was working with Liverpool Football Club in their media department, and he and I were having a heated discussion about something, and he said you should write an article about this. He said I think people would enjoy it. So, I did. I wrote this article, and he published it on the website, and then the club reshared it on their Twitter page. And I got quite a few people messaging me, as is always the case with social media. Some of them completely in agreement with me, some that telling me I'm the biggest idiot to ever speak and should never speak again. As is always the case with sports, there's always completely two polarizing sides. It's very rare that someone's in the middle. It's either very black or very white when it comes to this game. So, but my wife, obviously it wasn't my wife at the time, but she messaged me on Twitter to comment about the article, and we got chatting and then started exchanging messages. And a few months later, after talking, I decided this is a really nice girl. I should go get to meet her. So I actually traveled down to South Africa, which is where she was from. So 9,000 kilometers away, somewhere I'd never been before. Went and spent some time in South Africa. And yeah, as she said, fast forward 11 years married now, two kids, 6 country living in together. So yeah, it's been a
Wow.
wild journey.
Wow, that's a lot of passports.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, by the way, I assume that she was in favor of your article,
Yeah,
not
she was. She
contradicting
did
you
message.
as an idiot.
Yeah, that's probably the last time she agreed with me, to be honest, about anything. But yeah, she did. She actually quite liked the article.
Well, tell them real quick, Phil, where they can find you, because I want to talk about your brand real quick.
Yeah, sure. So, billionairesinboxers.com is probably one of the easiest places to find us. Although, if you just search Billionaires in Boxers on Google, you'll find our TV network, satellite television network, streaming channels, podcasts, radio, website, LinkedIn, all the usual places. But yeah, come check out Billionaires in Boxers. We're doing some pretty fun things. That's certain. That's for certain.
Yeah, you guys got a fun brand, and you're working with all sorts of sports teams, all sorts of
Hmm.
organizations around the world. Obviously, football being a primary, some rugby, some big names of Springboks and All
Yep.
Blacks, and then of course been in the cricket game a little bit, which of course you
Yep.
have to if you're South Africa or India or anywhere else where it's gigantic.
Yeah,
Little
it's huge.
Formula One, and then of course you've kind of established this name in the market to really generate revenue. And FIFA TV, 700 million
Yep.
users, and helping them just get some advertising right, the right people in the right place, and
Yeah.
matchmaking them a little bit. Is that pretty fun process there?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really interesting about sport, and I don't think people realize this often, is that the people that are usually at the top of sports clubs or even international sports federations, they tend to have been in the game rather than having been in business. So they only know what the game knows. So a great example of this, if we're talking about baseball, for example, was Moneyball and that whole kind of the James approach of, well, what's data and what's sport, and the clubs who've actually cleaned up with that are the ones who've really got the balance right between, yes, we're looking at the data, and yes, we're looking at the science behind this, but we're also combining this with the brains of sports, the people who've been in the game, that can feel it, that can taste it, that have experienced it. And combining those two things is where you get that success, but that's still quite rare in a lot of sports. So we were talking off air about number of the international sports federations I work with. The president of one that I'm working with at the moment, it was the former captain and manager of the team. This guy's gone all the way through the federation, right? Wears his heart on his sleeve, loves this country, represents his country, doesn't know jack about business. So when you're talking to him about getting investors and sponsors and creating partnerships and relationships, he sees this through the eyes of a player. He cannot look at this through the eyes of a businessman or through a president of a sports federation. So it definitely is exciting when it works well. I'm not going to pretend it's all smooth. There is definitely some bashing your head against the wall, trying to convince people to do something that is such an obvious decision for them. It's insane. But when it works and it does what it's supposed to do, I get to see the smile on their face. I get to see the enjoyment. I get to see the improvement in the grassroots in these countries, because there's more money to invest. So knowing that I've played my part in that really makes me tremendously proud, because ultimately football saved my life. So if I can help other clubs and countries to increase their revenue and increase their reach so that they can do the same for the next generation coming through, that makes me incredibly proud.
Yeah, I think you and I have this rare case of being in the game and being in the mix of that as the player, athlete, coach in that environment, and then going to the other side of entrepreneurship, business. And it was funny. I'm traveling with my son as we do the all the ballparks in the U.S. and in the major leagues, and we went to Cleveland last summer, where I coached in a couple of World Series, and he was asking me about like the stadium and all these questions, and I was like, well, I don't know, man. I've never actually watched a game from the stands. I know what's like underneath and where the clubhouse is and how we do things below surface and how things happen on the field. But out here in the fandom of what's happening in the business and where are the best places to be, I don't know. I was like, wow, this is a very different feel. But I want to come back to what you just said, which is football saved your life.
Yeah.
How so?
Well, I didn't have the best start in life. I had I was in a single parent family that was a lot of abuse, a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol, a lot of crime. It was just not a good environment for me to be. I was homeless at 14. And when I say homeless, I mean not just couch surfing. I mean sleeping on park benches and under bridges. And it was actually a football scholarship that gave me the accommodation to get me off the street. So in many respects, football really literally saved my life. It took me away from an environment where I had no food and I had no shelter, and it gave me the life that I have today. So football for me is, there's a great quote, actually. There's a former Liverpool manager from many years ago called Bill Shankly. And he said that people often talk about football as if it's a matter of life or death. And I can assure you it's much more important than that. And the reason I like that quote is that in many respects, that's true, isn't it? Because the fans that are in that ballpark that you were talking about, let's cut to the chase. At some point, those fans will pass on. They will no longer be on this earth anymore. But the ballpark will still be full of new players and new fans. So the club will remain long after you are gone. So in many respects, sports, particularly football, it's it's a religion. The churches are empty and the stadiums are full. This is what people are dedicating their life to and their passion to. And if football is that thing that can, not just save your life directly in the way that it did for me, literally taking me off the street and putting clothes on my back and food in my belly, but it can also be that thing that motivates people and gives them something to look forward to in their darkest hour. And it gives them that camaraderie of having a brotherhood and sisterhood around you, a real family environment. People talk about my club, for example, as the Liverpool family, and there are huge foundations that work within the community, and a lot of the money from the club is generated and donated to that foundation so that they can support people. So football and sports in general has the ability to save people, not just in a direct way in terms of showing off your athletic prowess, but also in terms of bringing you into a community, creating a community feel, creating a pride in your local area so that people want to take care of you, take care of the community, take care of each other, which ultimately is only going to benefit everybody. So I think sports plays a really huge role, not just in my life, but in pretty much everybody's life who has a passion for sports. In fact, the one thing I'll say, Trent, is this. Sometimes I meet people that say, oh, I'm not into sports. And my first question in my head is, what do you do with your day? Because it consumes me from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep. I think about it, talk about it, and work in it all day, every day. So yeah, football definitely saved my life. It was the launching pad for, to be honest, a truly blessed life that I'm honored to live right now.
Yeah, I think it's so special. And there is so many stories like this, Phil, that and the other thing I think that is challenging that most people don't get is that a lot of pro athletes have, and a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people in the military, especially forward forces, they have gone through a lot as young men and women, and they've had to overcome serious adversity. So much so that when me as a strength and conditioning guy who's about to go train you, Phil, till you're about sick to your stomach, right? Of training, and your legs are burning, and you're like, hey, this really sucks.
Yeah.
And a lot of people want to quit when that gets hard. And someone like Phil Pelucha goes, I've slept on a park bench. I've slept where I didn't know where I would sleep the next night. You think practice is hard? Because I had players, and my uncle was shot in front of me, murdered in cold blood by a gang. I mean, you think getting on a plane and being inconvenienced for the weekend is a problem? Like, hey man, this is my job, and this is easy compared to what I've seen. And then you get other people who try, and they're talented, and it's the first time they've seen adversity. Like, oh my gosh, someone's not coming with the nail salon and do a mani and pedi and get me right. I'm like, oh, man, hey man, I don't know if you're gonna make it here. This is not how it's gonna go, man. You gotta have some heart, and you gotta have some grit.
I have a saying that I've used for a long time, which is rock bottom is the strongest and best foundation to build from. Because I have seen people who have come from similar places to me that have that determination and that grit to keep going. And I think the attitude really behind that is quite a simple one when you think about it. There is nothing in my sports or business career that can ever be as bad as what I've already survived. So it kind of gives you an element of sort of fearlessness. Like you're almost a bit bulletproof. It's like, fine, throw it at me. Like I'm going to be okay because I've already survived this. Whereas, I have some friends of mine who, no disrespect to them, but they were coming through the academy, and they were in the academy because their father was a former professional player. So that's why they were there. So they've come from, I remember one time, for example, somebody was running late for training, and everyone was like, oh, they're going to be in trouble. They're going to be dropped.
Yeah.
So their dad brought them in the helicopter. Right. I'm thinking I took 4 buses to get here. You're coming in a helicopter. Right. So different world. But the first time they had adversity, the first time they had a setback, they actually didn't make the final call to get their professional contract. They just imploded. They went into meltdown. They didn't want to play the game anymore. They didn't want to try. They didn't want to. And it was all because they had no resilience. There was no foundation to build upon. It was just they'd never had somebody say no. So the first time it happened, it was really painful. Whereas if you're constantly being told no doesn't affect you anymore. Like no is a good answer for me because it's one step closer to the yes, because at some point someone's going to say yes. So let me get all the no's out the way right now so I can get to the yes as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think we just talked about that on another show. Like no is a great answer. Maybe is an awful answer. Like that's a terrible answer for me.
Maybe leaves you in limbo, and often people say maybe because they're trying to be kinder to you. So what they actually mean is no, but no feels too forceful. But honestly, I would say if you respect the person, don't say maybe, say yes or no. Right? The answer is either yes, we're going to do this, or no, we're not, so that I can focus my energy on somewhere else that is worth me spending my energy. If you tell me maybe, that says to me that I now have to do more to convince you. But if what you actually meant was no, then just say no.
No problem. Like, no is it easy? Like, I will stop spending energy and time on you, and I won't bother you anymore either. Like, that's important for both of our relationship, is that you won't keep hearing from me. And Phil, guilt and shame because you haven't done something yet, or that someone
Correct.
feels bad about you. So it's a great answer. And I want to briefly stop here for a minute and just say, hey, I wrote a book called Leading Winning Teams. Please check it out. It's in the below. It's you can buy it right now on pre-sale on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. The links are in the chat. And we talk about this, right? In leading winning teams, you've got to have people that understand relationships. And what I'm hearing you, Phil, is you just kind of talk about sales. This is sales 101. Yes, no, maybe. And you guys have just really figured out relationship and sales and marketing. Walk me through a little bit of, when you talk to most entrepreneurial companies, Phil, they've got sales. They've got some sales. Because they wouldn't have got to where they're at without some sales.
Sure.
Some people have products that just like, listen, you'd be an idiot. You could fall out of a boat and still sell stuff because you're the only one who's selling rafts, but a lot of people struggle in this area. Even though they've invented the best widget, they can't move the widget. They can't find someone to buy the widget. This is a superpower of yours. And I find that pretty rare from entrepreneurs that really got sales and marketing done well. So let's talk a little bit about what you've learned along that route.
So I think the easiest way of answering this is that everybody else is trying to stand out by doing exactly the same thing. And you can't stand out by blending in, right? So every single business feels like they're saying the same crap, right? That nobody comes to you and says, oh, we're kind of average at what we do. Everyone tells you they're the best. Everyone tells you you need to be working with us. Everyone says we're unique. It drives you insane, right? And what people aren't really doing is spending time building the relationships that are going to actually establish those connections, because you can have the best product in the world, but if there's nobody on your calendar to talk to you about it, you're not going to make any money. So what people are doing in this day and age is they're spending too much time trying to be famous for, let's say, 5 million of the wrong people instead of 50 of the right people. And when I say that, almost every time I say it, people agree. They go, yeah, I understand it's supposed to be famous for 50 of the right people rather than 5 million of the wrong. But then when I say to them, great, so who are those 50 people for you and what's your strategy to get in front of them? It's like rabbit in the headlights. They look terrified. It's like, I don't know. I don't have that information. And for me, that's what it comes down to. So we've all kind of heard the sayings like, your network is your net worth, and it's not what you know, it's who you know. And we all know those to be true. But I think what's happened with the advancement of technology is that people are fearful that world no longer exists. So now it's about Facebook adverts and cookies and video sales letters and TikTok videos and tracking people around the internet and stalking them with cookies and all this kind of stuff. And the reality is that world still exists with creating relationships. It just requires one of these things: a microphone. Not even just this one, right? I made my first $1 million doing podcasting with a microphone I bought off Gumtree for $30 secondhand, right? So what I've learned is that everybody else is take. So what you need to do is law of reciprocity and give, get. So the two things that I usually give to people are an opportunity to come on a show and give them some exposure. So we have our broadcast network that reaches 50 million homes across 40 different countries, podcast network, million downloads plus, streaming radio, blah, blah, blah. But the point is this: by inviting that potential client, that potential event organizer, that potential partner onto a show to give them exposure, I'm giving them something and I'm not asking for anything in return. The second thing I'm going to do with that piece of content is I'm going to find out who it is that they would like to meet, and I'm going to send that content directly to those people and try and make introductions from people that are in my network. This is a game that I call connection currency, which actually, by the way, given inflation, is far more valuable than monetary currency. Connection currency is the thing that if you spend your time generating those relationships, helping people, being that person that can make those connections, not only do people really respect you and like you, but it's a very profitable thing to do as well. So I actually like having connection currency just as I do having monetary currency, because to be honest, if my connection currency runs out, my money's going to run out pretty soon after. So, but ultimately for me, it all comes down to building relationships with the right people. So utilizing that give, get formula of, let me give you an opportunity to come on my show. Let me give you some introductions. And then when it comes time for me to get, I'm going to ask for your help. Trent, this is what I do. Who do you know that might be interested in that? That gives you the ability to raise your hand and self-select or make an introduction for me. And we both know referred business is the easiest business in the world to close. So it all comes down to relationship building for me. And that's where I find most people struggle in this day and age, is that they are they're losing the relationships in favor of technology. Whereas my stance on technology is that technology is there to enhance the human experience rather than replace it.
Tell everyone what's the name of your podcast so everyone can tune in.
Yeah, so Billionaires in Boxers Global is the show that has me and I think about 50 other hosts on our network at the moment who are clients and partners of ours who are interviewing amazing people, sharing their content, doing exactly what it is I'm teaching here, which is they are networking with the people who are helping their business to grow in terms of income, in terms of partnerships, in terms of knowledge. I always talk about in every show, you either earn or you learn. And that's really powerful, but it also means that the listener or the viewer gets to go and engage in content that is really high level, fly on the wall, real business discussions between two or more heavyweights in their industry having a phenomenal conversation. I've been told numerous times that this is more valuable than a college degree. So I would highly recommend going and checking it out.
Love it. I love it. Billionaires and Boxers. It's incredible, right? I know people will be tuning in, and I love what you said. I love give, give, get. The connection currency. Hadn't heard that before, but man, that's special. I'm gonna push back for a minute on you on, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I always add another part of that because I like to tell the story of when I had interviewed with the Yankees. I knew George Steinbrenner, the owner of the Yankees then. He didn't know me. So my network, my connection currency has always been, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And when you talk about, so when you talk about when people tune in to Billionaires and Boxers, I believe that they know Phil Pelucha to be an authentic, genuine guy, a former pro football player who overcame a lot to succeed, a Liverpool faithful who has a deep-rooted grounding to his foundation, a family environment, and he's created that, and he's loyal. And he's a man who does what he says and can get things done. So there's all these things of how they know Phil Pelucha, which I think is this is kind of a crucial element that I think people miss. It's like, oh, I know all these people. I've got great contacts. I'm connected LinkedIn with the CEO of McDonald's. Oh, great. Does he know your name? I have no idea who that guy is. I don't think I'm calling the CEO tomorrow and going, hey, it's Trent. We're on LinkedIn. He's going to go, yeah, I don't think I know you, man. And so there's these challenges, right? So, but I do believe you've hit this dead on, man. I mean, the relationships are that, but what I think you've done in your connection currency is that you've built a strategic relationship that's two-way. It's not a one-way street.
Definitely. In fact, I would almost argue that if you're going into it trying to work out what it is that you're going to get out of it, you're going to be transparent. People are going to see it straight away. Whereas I make it very clear when I enter into a new relationship. Sometimes I even just say it as bluntly as, look, I'm going to do as much as I can to help you with what it is you're doing right now, because there's a couple of things I want your help with off the back end, but I'm going to do the favor for you first. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So yeah, you're right. I think that's a great way of looking at it. It's not what you know, it's who you know and who knows you. I think that's a great add-on.
And how they know you.
It's not about. So when I talk about that, I'll give an example of what the flip side of that looks like, because I see this a lot in business and in sports, actually, believe it or not. A lot of the international sports federations, they don't even know each other, which is incredible for me. They don't even talk to each other. It's bizarre. So they're all trying to work out the
same thing here, by the way. We're running into the same issue here in the States.
Yeah. It's weird, right? So they're all trying to work out the same problems, to the same solutions to the same problems, and they're coming up with the same ideas, but they're not collaborating with each other to make sure that people grow. It seems ludicrous to me. And there's always this thing of I don't want them to know our secrets. Well, here's the funny thing, right? This always makes me laugh when they say that. It's I work with all of you, and you all have the same damn secrets, right? You're all hiding the same stuff from each other. This is pointless, right? It's so crazy. It's I don't want to be in a room with that guy because I don't want him to know that we aren't doing great right now. It's that's funny because he said the exact same thing about you 2 days ago. So it's quite amusing. But the reason I'm bringing this up is this is what I describe as being your industry's best kept secret. So you have some credibility, you're good at what you do, you have some people who love you, but outside that small circle of influence, nobody knows that you exist. That's why your business isn't where it needs to be. That's why you're not bringing in the investment and commercial deals that you should be, because the right people don't know that you exist, and therefore they have no relationship with you, and you're not going to move very far forward. Your ceiling is now set not by your talent and your ability or your impact that you can have on people, but the fact that nobody outside this small circle of influence knows that you exist. So for so many people, the number one ticket for success, and there's a lot of things that we do, but genuinely, this, if I had to sum it up, I'd probably say that this is the number one thing for both sports clubs and businesses that I have seen help them win. It's just increase that circle of influence. Make sure that more of the right people know you. Like if I asked you to create a list of 50 people, in fact, I'll give this exercise to your listeners because I think this is a great exercise. I talk about the 4 Ps, and the 4 Ps are purchasers, partners, promoters, and platforms. And you do it in that order. So purchasers, partners, promoters, and platforms. Purchasers are obvious. They're people who are going to buy your stuff, right? Partners are going to refer you, give investment, drive traffic towards you. Promoters are the ones who don't really want to be either of those two things, but will shout about you because they love what you do. And then the final one is platforms, television, media, keynote speaking, radio, television, whatever, right? But if I was to ask you to write a list of 50 people that fall into those 4 categories, so let's say 20 potential clients, 10 potential partners, 10, 10, 10, and we just do it that way, right? And that's what I want you to look at. That's what I want you to write down. I want you to write down 50 names of people. If you had a way of getting those 50 people on the calendar, whether that's utilizing a broadcast network, giving them an introduction, inviting them to speak at an event, inviting them to do an interview on your podcast, or inviting them to help co-write a chapter of your book or give an expert speech, whatever it is, right? If you had a reason to give them something that makes them want to get on your calendar, think about you in your own mind now. How much has your business exponentially grown as a result of those people now knowing that you exist? But yet so many people aren't taking the time to focus on who are those people, what strategy am I going to employ to strategically network with them, and the kicker, what can I give to that person that means that they want to reward me with the thing that would help me grow?
Yeah, I think that is such good advice. I mean, one of the game changers for me writing this book, Phil, was I reached out to someone like you because I was like, man, I want to be connected with people who will give me an endorsement, who I know, who have been world beaters into the market. And then I asked you to come on my show. And man, then I go to LinkedIn and I Google or I LinkedIn search Phil Pelucha. And then 5 to 7 names come up right and say, hey, when people search Phil, these are other names that are like Phil, successful people, and also connected to him, which, as you and I know, birds of a feather flock together. And they do that because they're all flying in the same direction. They're flying towards abundance. They're flying towards, hey, how do we get there better and more efficiently? Because the folks in Phil Pelucha's world are about getting a little bit better every day. Better today than I was yesterday, and better even more tomorrow. And so when I look at that, like there are all sorts of exponential ways to grow that. And Phil, if I took those 50 and I went to LinkedIn, I can easily add, let's just say 3 other names per. And I just went to 200, just like that, of 200 high quality prospects in the market. And one of the things that I think you do better than most organizations, you've talked about this, is and maybe it's due to your childhood, maybe it's due to the sport, and football is very good about celebrating even the win. Like, hey, even if it's only our 5th in the last 30, we're going to celebrate the shit out of this because we may not know when it's going to come again, right? You're celebrating the wins with your team. You're enjoying the journey together. How are you doing that well?
So I definitely think it's a sports thing. I mean, look, I'm a big believer that business is a team sport, right? And it really doesn't matter how good you are at your particular position on the field. If you're not surrounded by people who are equally as good at their position, you're probably not going to win something. You're certainly not going to win a trophy. So I love my team, and one of the things that has been great from our recruitment standpoint is that we've brought in people that have different skill sets to me, because there's no point having 10 players who all play the game in the exact same way that I do in the same position. That's pointless. We're just going to butt heads. So everybody brings something special and unique to the table, and we're always challenging each other. I mean, you were talking about that incremental improvements and increasing. I'm a big believer in your vibe attracts your tribe, and that doesn't just include the people who you partner with externally, who become partners and mentors and friends or clients, but your vibe attracts your tribe also includes the people who work with you and for you. So okay, it's my business and I'm the CEO, but each person in my team is a member of my team. And if I walk out onto that field on my own, I am going to lose that game. If I walk out and we're all wearing the same jersey and we're all pulling in the same direction, there's a bloody good chance that we're going to win that game. And therefore, of course, we're all going to celebrate it. I mean, could you imagine how sad sports would be if in football, soccer, for many of the people watching and listening, the goal scorer was the only person that celebrated. None of the rest of the team celebrated with them because it wasn't them that scored the goal, right? Or every time you lift the trophy, it's only the captain that lifts the trophy. Nobody else gets to touch it because they're the captain. They won the trophy and nobody else. It'd be such a depressing way to have the sport, but it would also be a really depressing way to run the business. So, I remember last year I won Business Consultant of the Year. And the first thing I did was celebrate my team, because there's no way that I would have won a personal accolade like Business Consultant of the Year if it wasn't for all the hard work that my team do and all the effort that they put into it. I won an award because people recognize me as the figurehead, but I recognize that I'm probably about 20% of that. 80% of that are the great people who surround me.
I love that. I know we got to cut this off because I know we're running out of time. Thank you, Phil. But the last thing I'll say on that is the thing that scares the snot out of me and makes me sad is that I will see young people, old people, all sitting in the Liverpool stands who will celebrate a goal like the birth of a child.
Yeah.
And then when they make their own notion, when their neighbor next to them gets a new job, when they get the money finally for a new car, and they hit a goal that they absolutely want to celebrate, their first child makes it through college. We're not celebrating. We're not grabbing onto that. You're happy to celebrate a goal, but celebrating along the way, I think, is so pertinent and so evident. And for us, on winning. Leading winning teams, we're excited about a big celebration we're going to have in Tulum, and we're talking about the 16 strategies of growth, of which Phil just brought in 2 huge ones: sales and marketing, and celebrating and winning culture with your team. Those are 2 huge parts of 16 Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Pacific. You can join us on Winners Find a Way on Leadershipity YouTube channel, LinkedIn Live, and Facebook Live. Phil Pelucha, thank you so much for joining us today on Winners Find a Way, buddy.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much, and best of luck with the book. I've read it. It's amazing. It's going to help a lot of people, and yeah, I'm excited we